Martial classes were really tied to their equipment and weapons. They kind of needed a little bit more oomph to help them compete at those higher levels.
Right. There's always been a disparity between martial and magic through its whole lifetime.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will help it a bit.
I'm Joey.
I'm Kevin, and welcome back to the Paint and Paper Podcast.
Today we're talking about some Unearthed Arcana.
These are some changes to some pretty core classes in D&D that have just been released. They're still in playtest and are subject to your review and a survey that could change them in the future. But so far it seems the Wizards' plan is to release this as a new player's handbook and core rulebook set in 2024.
A lot of the information that they're using to make these changes comes from the 2021 player survey, as stated in the Unearthed Arcana article. Today, we're specifically looking at the changes to weapons, being weapon properties, and how they kind of intend to change spells. Some very interesting changes, as kind of everybody knows, martial classes were really tied to their equipment and weapons. And so they kind of needed a little bit more oomph to help them compete at those higher levels.
Right. There's always been a disparity between martial and magic classes that has affected Dungeons and Dragons through its whole lifetime.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will help it a bit.
Yeah. In the early game, the way that it was kind of managed was different classes leveled at different speeds. And so
also casters had to make a check to cast any spell,
and casting was a lot more hazardous. But now it's much more, everybody levels at the same speed. There's not really the kind of same hazards that are associated with casting. So casting is much more free, and there is just much more utility and versatility that casters have that really puts them ahead of fighters, barbarians, and all those other martials.
All the good boys.
So let's jump right into the weapon properties. So I guess I should specify, because weapon properties were something that already existed, being light, heavy, two-handed, reach, versatile, and so on. Now they have introduced a second tier of weapon properties that are known as mastery properties. And those mastery properties gives you secondary abilities on top of what the weapon can already do. A lot of these properties, they don't require a action to use. They're kind of just a passive buff that has a trigger that kind of just happens.
These are also going to be provided in your class. So these are another feature that you'll find in at least Fighter and Barbarian so far that will scale with your level. And I think we saw that there are feats to do this too. Just like how you can take a feat to be a little bit of a battle master, you're going to be able to take a feat to add some of these weapon properties onto your best tools.
Yeah, they introduced some new feats called Epic Boons, which is a feat that you get at level 20 that gives you the ability for weapon mastery. It's a little bit unclear as to how exactly you can get those, if they can be selected as feats or if they can only be selected as boons, because they have a little bit odd prerequisites. But fighters get 3 of them right off the bat, and I think the barbarian gets a couple. So let's get into these properties. Let's get into what these mastery properties actually do.
Well, actually, before we even get there, I think we should spend a quick note on a change to an existing one. You might be familiar with the throne property. They have specified it to allow you to draw multiple weapons in a turn, where previously you were only allowed one interaction. So a thrown weapon it's not going to consume your interaction. So if a fighter with 4 attacks can draw and throw 4 hand axes in a turn if they wanted to. At least my reaction, I think both of our reaction to that was that that's kind of how we ran it anyway.
Yeah, we didn't really even know that was the case.
And I think That's going to be a theme through all of these changes that we're going to talk about.
That's how that thing works.
We weren't supposed to be doing that?
So getting into the mastery properties, the first one is Cleave. The prerequisite is a melee weapon with the heavy property.
I think that's a feature we've seen a couple times before. Like a barbarian can do something similar to that when they kill something. Cleave is the same as a Battlemaster's sweeping attack, which once we see more of the new Battlemaster, we'll have to see how those interact, because then that's 2 extra attacks on a hit.
Nexus Flex, the prerequisite being versatile property. So this is really good for the kinds of clerics or other sorts of fighters that really want to have a high AC and don't want to sacrifice that shield.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're just a duelist in that sense, like if you have a rapier and a dagger kind of deal.
Yeah, it's a nice fun buff to a good old sword and board.
Yeah.
It really only, in most cases, is going to give you the chance to get 2 more damage out of an attack, but, you know, I'll take it.
Next up is Graze.
This is a really good one.
Yeah, I remember we were looking at this. We kind of both liked this one because as a martial in combat, the only thing that you can really do to kind of affect the tide of combat is just swing. And so if you swing and miss, it really sucks. That is an action that is just wasted. There's no sort of secondary effect like a lot of spells, and there's no way to kind of recoup some of that damage like the AoE spells with the spellcasters.
Especially if you whiff your whole action surge, because I know I've done that.
Yeah, that can be absolutely brutal.
Yeah, that's a real feels bad man moment.
Yeah, so it's just kind of good because it just feels nice. It's going to be very interesting to see how a lot of these things combo together. When we were first reading through this, we were really thinking that, you can combine Graze with Cleave, and you can stride and hit out at 2 creatures, and if you miss, you do it both. But there was some stuff later on that kind of showed that you have to choose one property.
When you're declaring the attack, I
Yes,
think you have to declare which mastery feat you're using.
It's unclear exactly how much these things are going to synergize. It kind of seems like they're trying to temper them from being just crazy, because I can imagine that a lot of these will scale pretty wild with certain feats, especially Sentinel and like the Polearm Master feats. So
we love Sentinel synergy.
Yeah, interesting food for thought and how they're going to combine. Next up is Nick, prerequisite light property.
So this is really to keep your bonus action open for that second wind or whatever other bonus action you have in your pocket.
A little bit more love for dual wielders, especially Rogue, who might want to get in their full attacks and still wants to disengage. So definitely a Rogue's best friend.
If they get this, we'll have to see.
If they get it,
they're not included in this Unearthed Arcana yet.
If they're using light weapons.
Right.
Next is Push.
Classic.
I think we thought that this was probably the strongest of all of them just by itself. This is, I think, probably one of the strongest properties that was released in this new list. It just has a great amount of strategic possibility.
Yeah. I think it's also going to be key to making combat more dynamic in 5th edition. I think every class needs more stuff like this. If you ever dungeon mastered, or I guess if you ever even played, because everyone would run into this, and you've had a combat that slogs, you probably realize that at least your villain needs an ability like this to like throw people around the battlefield, make use more of the field, make the combat dynamic. If more people had this, I think we'd be better off. Yeah,
and there's very few instances where there are player abilities that kind of do this. The ones that immediately come to mind are Eldritch Blast, Gust of Wind, and Thunder Wave type abilities. Just giving this kind of push package right on top of a melee weapon is fantastic.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of fun for those marshals being able to just push people off ledges and stuff.
The next one we got is Sap Prerequisite, no other properties. So this as to specify, it's not. My brain just stopped. It doesn't it means you can't have any other properties on the weapon. There are some, like a mace. It was one of the ones you saw that has no property.
Mace, flail, and Morning Star are the ones that have no other properties. Pretty strong ability. It definitely is an interesting thing, and it kind of incentivizes like a cleric who's using a blunt weapon who might not have a high dex. It kind of incentivizes going last in the turn order. So
just some good solid disruption into the fight.
Yeah, nice.
If you're afraid of getting hit by a certain guy.
Yeah, nice ability. Next up is slow.
This was the one that has no prerequisites on the weapon.
I think it is Sentinel, where it's like if you hit something, their speed is reduced to 0.
Right.
I could really kind of see this be used in conjunction with that to really kind of lock down enemies and like really keep them in the bout.
Yeah, it's a spicy combo with a lot of moving parts. Topple, prerequisite, heavy, reach, or versatile property.
And then next up is Vex Machina.
Vex Machina.
Prerequisite. Vex, prerequisite, ammunition, finesse, or light property. What this kind of is incentivizing the Legolas fantasy. Yeah, you're just going to unload a bunch of arrows. You're going to throw a bunch of axes, and you're just going to have that kind of guarantee to hit.
Yeah, you pointed out that there are a lot of bonuses to hit for sharpshooters anyway, so this one might be more useful for the finesse and light folks out there. But a ranged fighter probably doesn't need that hit boost that much.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of think about it, a bow and arrow is the only weapon in the game that gets a +6. You know.
Combining a +2 from the ammunition and the bow itself.
Yeah.
Which is expensive, but technically possible.
Yeah.
I think this is a Critical Role reference.
I think so very much.
I think there's not much else it could be.
Next, we move into spells.
We're not going to talk about the net.
Oh, yeah. The net has been moved from
now
a
talk
weapon.
About spells.
Yeah. The net, we talked about it. It got moved from a weapon to adventuring gear, which kind of made sense already. Would be nice in a future UA if we had a lot more love given to the kind of adventuring gear, like if the Molotov cocktail alchemy fire. Alchemy fire, kettle trops, and the net were better, or like scaled with your level and modifiers, I think that would be a really welcome change.
I think the net was only in the weapons table to begin with because someone at Wizards loves the trident and net gladiator
absolutely
trope.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic trope. Yeah. I love it too. So then we move into spells. So the biggest change with spells is spells are no longer class specific as much as they are archetype specific. So they're changing it from these are wizard spells, these are warlock spells, to these are divine, primal, and arcane spells. Mm-hmm. Right now, in this UA, they've only released information about wizards, warlocks, and sorcerers, and in turn have only released the new list for the arcane list.
Right. So far, it seems pretty interesting. I think overall, you could say that it kind of takes away from the uniqueness of each class, but they are trying to attack that issue more heavily in the classes themselves.
Yes. This change is, in my opinion, a welcome change, mm-hmm. because there were a lot of spells that the wizard had that, didn't really make sense why the other two didn't really get access to them. So it's just more expansive spell list is just all around a good thing.
This is like the third time that I realized that, or try to check the primal spell list and I forget that it's not out yet.
Neither is the divine.
Right. But the thing is, like, Find Familiar better be on the primal spell list, because I think what this list will do is it will shore up that feeling you probably had where it's like, oh, I'm a wizard, but I can't take this spell. Mm-hmm. And my best example of that is that Druids could not take Find Familiar, which was just odd.
Yeah, absolutely. As for this list, the only thing that they didn't do any changes to the spells. The spells that that already existed. They changed up the schools that some spells are, and those are marked with an asterisk. But everything else is pretty much the same.
There's probably too many to list at this point, but I'd say go check out the Unearthed Arcana yourself, and maybe get some play testing in, you guys.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what people think of these changes, especially the weapon properties, to see if those really feel impactful enough to justify taking.
Yeah, if you do play any of this stuff, by the way, comment down below if you agree, disagree, or just your general thoughts. Love to hear them.
Well, thank you for stopping by. These have been the weapon properties and spell property updates.